Alright, I have been looking forward to this one for a while because when Tamron introduced their 28 to 75 f2.8, which I did a video on, that was like the perfect lens for the a7 III, which is Sony's most popular camera. It's even good for like Sony's newer, smaller APS-C mirrorless cameras like their 6600, 6400. So it was just the absolute perfect lens. So when Tamron announced this 17 to 28, also an f2.8 zoom lens, I was just absolutely ecstatic. This was going to be the lens to get. I had to get it in immediately and do a video on this. So I have taken this all over the place. Just came back from Oregon with it for Sony Kondo, and it is absolutely amazing. So we got to talk about this. Not perfect, but amazing, and absolutely a lens that you should consider. So here's why this matters. I mean, for the longest time, having f2.8 lenses meant that you would need an extremely heavy and large setup. It meant build quality that matched that. However, that also meant that your prices were going to be extreme. So usually about $1,800 and up. But f2.8 lenses matter because if you want to blur out your background, or if you want better low light performance, you need these constant wide aperture lenses. And the only way to get them previously was to go with these big, heavy, large, expensive setups. And now Tamron has kind of delivered that exactly for this market of a7 III camera, which are, you know, $2,000, and you don't want to spend another $2,000 on one lens. And you also don't want this to be so large and heavy that it was basically better to just keep your DSLR. So this is why this lens matters so much. You're in that sub $1,000 category. It is incredibly small and lightweight, matches this incredibly well. The build is kind of where most of the things get cut. One of the big sacrifices on the build is that we don't have an AF on-off switch, which is the one that I like the most. So that's really good for Tamron because they don't have to have any room for that. They don't have to worry about weather sealing those areas. But I do like having that switch, and there are times that I miss it and you have to go through the menus and kind of enable manual focus. You do not have it on here. But one of the big advantages here is that this is all internal zoom. So if you're using this on a gimbal, it is amazing because your center of gravity doesn't shift at all while you're using this for video. So I really actually appreciate that. And again, incredibly small and lightweight. Overall, the smoothness of both of these is going to be really good. Again, no locks or anything like that. No custom function buttons. Nothing like that. You can't control. A lot of lenses have a separate controller that you can trigger to like aperture or something like that. None of that. So plain and simple, zoom and focus, and that is it. But it is all an internal zoom, which is great for photography, but even better for videography. Again, no adjustment in your center of gravity while you're zooming. Now, I have been using this lens with the a7 III and the a7R4 the most. And I will say I've had some issues with the a7R4. Again, that camera has not actually been out yet, and so there's some communication issues right now. I'm sure they'll be fixed with a firmware update really soon, but if it's a camera you've got on pre-order and you're looking for this lens to go with it, you might want to hold off a little bit. There are just some times that it stops focusing. I did disconnect the lens, put it back on, and then it focused again. Have not had any issues with the a7 III or R3, so again, seems to be isolated to a brand new camera, which can sometimes happen with these third-party lenses. I was also really impressed with how this lens handles flare. I mean, it just looks great overall. I wasn't seeing any kind of issues that I would normally see on a lens like this. Now at f2.8, I did find it just a little bit less sharp than I would have liked, especially in the corners. Now, that's especially with these high-end cameras like the a7R4, which are really pushing the limits of this. Now, if you're using something like the a7 III, you'll be a lot more happy with the quality coming out of this. And then again, when you start stopping down to like 5.6 and beyond, which is where most of my shots were, then you start noticing that this is a great quality lens all the way around. Really impressed, especially for under $1,000. Autofocus seemed great as well. I mean, you're not going to push the limits of autofocus on a wide angle lens like this, even at f2.8. But I shot all of this at f2.8, and for video or for photos, it was tracking, autofocus was great, and so overall, literally all my photos were in focus and the videos were in focus, so it was doing a very good job. But yes, it's a little bit easy for you to get that kind of performance from a lens like this. Now, if you haven't picked up the 28 to 75 yet, I actually highly recommend that lens first. It is just so much more versatile, and having an f2.8 in that kind of range is even more important. I will say for wide angle lenses, I'm not all the time shooting at f2.8. So really the only time I am is if I'm in low light with no tripod, or I have a moving subject or want to blur that background out. But for a lot of situations with a wide angle lens, I'm shooting at like f16, something like that, in landscape photos. Sometimes I'm even focus stacking these lenses. And for those situations, it might not be as necessary to have that. You do have a Sony option with an f4. Again, I still kind of prefer the f2.8, and I would say that even if you're using this lens at f4, it should be pretty much equal to the performance of that one. I haven't tested them side by side yet, but the performance on this was really good, so I easily think you'll be able to match that. A little bit of a reduction in image quality at 2.8, but again, you don't have to shoot there if you do not want to. And a lot of the situations, I had this lens somewhere between f8 and f16 for a lot of landscape shoots. But man, hiking through trails with a small and lightweight lens with this, honestly, the build quality has survived everything I've thrown at it. It still looks perfect. Is absolutely amazing. And then to have one lens that you can use for just about everything. So when we were shooting portraits, being able to shoot those at f2.8 is great to have. That's one of the areas that I love having them at f2.8. And then for video, this was huge for me for video, having a constant aperture, having a wide aperture for video, and then having a lens that didn't have any external focusing. So it meant that I could use it on a gimbal and didn't have to worry about anything. I use this a lot at weddings. I use it a lot out in the field. So for video, I think this is a highly recommended lens and something you should absolutely consider. If you haven't seen it yet, go see if we have the A7R4 review up. I'll post it here when we do. Also check out my Instagram because I've got all the images that I was shooting with this camera. So follow me there and you'll see a whole bunch of other stuff. Thank you guys so much for watching. Man, we got some really cool stuff coming up. Heading out to Iceland should be a whole lot of fun. Make sure you follow us, and thank you guys so much for watching. Appreciate the like and sub, and we'll see you soon.